This is Invisible Inc., the podcast for under-resourced women entrepreneurs, and I'm your host, Shubha Chakravarti, founder of Achieve. In this podcast, I talk to women entrepreneurs at every stage of their journey about the challenges, the highs, the lows, and what they've learned along the way. We'll also hear from experts who share valuable tips on how to succeed the smart way. Let's jump in. What do you do when your dream career slips out of grasp and a global pandemic hits just as you're trying to change course? How do you take a boring, male-dominated business by the horns as a young, untested entrepreneur through guts, discipline, and tenacity? How do you stay true to your inner calling while still being financially viable? In this episode, entrepreneur Juliana Scheidhauer talks about finishing college at 18, her love of the Marine Corps, bootstrapping a business from her parents' garage, and more. Here's Juliana. Hi, Juliana. It's great to talk to you today. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to dive in with this with you.
So tell us a little bit more about you, your background.
So I am here in St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up here, spent most of my life here, and I went homeschooled from about 6th grade all the way through high school. From there, I went into college and did that remotely. So I finished high school around 16 and college around 18. I also worked at a nonprofit around 16. I worked there as an intern and then worked my way up into the acting admin director for a small nonprofit.
So you finished college right around the time kids are thinking about applying. What happens next? I know that you enlisted in the Marine Corps. That's pretty unusual. Can you talk about what drove that?
Yeah, so I wanted to go into the Marine Corps and become an officer. So I went the OCS route, officer candidate route. My thought was that I would go into the FBI. They wouldn't take people until 23. So I had a couple of years in between, and I know that going into the military would help the selection process and going into the FBI. I ultimately decided not to go the FBI route, but I still wanted to do the Marines. So during my time at OCS, Officer Candidate School, I got medically discharged and I came back. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next as I was, trying to get better from what happened at OCS. I wanted to do martial arts, maybe start another business. And then COVID happened. And so that put things in a different environment for me. I was previously looking at getting a physical location for my other business, and I decided I didn't want to do that because of everything with COVID. I still wanted to work out and get more fit and get healthy again. I decided to get some workout equipment, and then I saw that was a good market. It was really hot, and kind of just started from there.
So when you went in, did you have specific goals for how big the business was going to get or what you wanted to do with it?
Absolutely not. So almost everything in my life, I've been this is exactly what I want to do. This is how I'm going to accomplish it and attack these goals. However, this business, I probably did it for about a year and a half before I even considered doing it as a business. So the business at Reimagined Resources is we sell and service workout equipment. We also do parts, and we're building kind of like a lifestyle brand of other resources that are connected with it. But at the start, it was literally just selling workout equipment. I didn't think that was a very viable, great business plan, or just that's not what I imagined myself doing, right? If I was going to start a business, it was going to be more sexy than picking up workout equipment and then reselling it. But I seem to do pretty well in that space. It's really fun to just go through all the different workout equipment and sourcing that and selling that and learning more about the different types of pieces and how they all worked.
So was it just a side hustle when you started and you were just trying to make some extra money on the side?
Yeah, it was definitely a side hustle, but I knew that it couldn't stay a side hustle because I was making too much money at that the first year. And this isn't the profit, but the sales were over $150,000 the first year. There was one particular moment when the neighborhood association came to my parents' house. So we started out in my apartment. We went into my parents' garage and we took up their garage, their back porch, part of their basement and inside. And then I expanded to my grandma's garage. So part of her garage and her back porch. And neighborhood association came to us and said, you got to shut down your operations. And I was like, I'm going to school. I can't do that right now. And so at that point, I was like, well, I either need to make it a business or I need to stop doing it, or at least get insurance to cover myself. Because at that point, I wasn't an official LLC. And so I was very exposed at that point. And I know as, entrepreneurs and business people, it is not recommended to do that. At that point, I decided I needed to make it a business. I looked for a place to how are we going to expand? What's our strategy and all that kind of stuff. I definitely was very concerned the first day. I went ahead and reached out to a couple of people. I did my research, and I think that's always something that someone should do. I found out the neighborhood association and the board were actually business owners, and the pretense which they brought against me was that you couldn't have any kind of business out of your house. You can work from home. You can have business assets on your property, which was completely not reasonable because it's during the pandemic and everybody's working from home. Anyways, I found out that several of the board members were also business owners and ran it out of their own house. So at that point, it gave me a lot more confidence and assurance and understanding that they couldn't really actually do anything to me until they went to the city. I was willing to fight it because the other board members were also business owners.
You talked a bit about the early days of your venture. You had the idea you've got revenue now. What happens next? Did you start with a sales goal? What was your next milestone?
I can't remember what came first, or we got a truck, which was a big thing because beforehand we were using a van and that wasn't the best. We had to take everything apart, but getting a truck allowed us to do a lot more. So looking at our operations and trying to figure out how we can make it go more smoothly and what would bring in more revenue and sales ultimately, we started looking into spaces so that we can get out of my parents' garage because we are limited on our infrastructure. I brought in some extra help. So I started hiring my brother. Even from the beginning, I started having my family help. If someone was there to pick up an item, the porch pickup, I'd have my parents ask them to put it out for me, collect the money. I would ask my brother and hire him to come help pick up equipment and take equipment apart, put it together. It was a lot of work for sure. I was working probably 80 plus hours, getting hundreds of messages a day. Yeah, and just out till midnight, 1, 2 in the morning sometimes, just picking up equipment, putting things together. It was just a lot of work. So we brought in more people as well. I think that was a turning point of just bringing in more people, trying to not just do the operations, but run a business.
So, now you're starting to talk about real commitments in terms of finance. Can you talk about funding? How did you think about it? I mean, you're generating cash by selling, but then you're starting to employ people.
It was maybe a little more fun not having to think about the business part and also more revenue that way when you didn't have to invest. But ultimately, you want to look at the long-term strategy, not just what can make you a quick buck now, because there's a lot of risk in that. And also there's limited room for growth. And so ultimately, when I decided I wanted to make this something long-term, something that we can grow into, I'm willing to be more of a growth company rather than just a company that tries to make a profit. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. It doesn't really matter what kind of industry it's in, as long as it's making the world a better place. And so if I could find something within what I'm doing to make that mission possible, then I can do that.
So it sounds like you did actually have to worry about funding when you hired your employees. Where did you get the funding? Did you have savings? Did you borrow from friends? How did that whole work out?
At the very, very beginning, I had $500 left in my bank account. I still had debt from school, but $500 left in my bank account. And I decided I wanted to purchase some workout equipment. And I can at least make back what I put into it. So I wasn't going to lose money. And if you only have $500, you don't have much further to go anyway. So I figured I have a degree at some point. I can get a minimum wage job, stripe some parking lots. I can work hard. Yeah, at the beginning, I started with $500. When we went into upgrading and putting more into that capital investment of trucks and people, that was self-funded through the business because we're already operating. But then a lot of it also came from myself and family members.
Did you ever consider or have you considered outside funding, and what do you think about that route?
Yes, so definitely considered outside funding for the company. But when we talked to banks and SBA loan officers, it was difficult in getting funding because we had to be in business for 2 years and be in the black, so be profitable, which makes sense, right? But at the same time, it's difficult as a startup that you're already profitable business that has a viable business model that is working, and you can't get funding to grow and have that infrastructure.
Have you managed to crack that conundrum of?
Yeah, I have not cracked that one yet. We're about a year old now. So because we've invested very heavily into the business, I'm not sure if we made profitability. We probably broke about even last year. Like we're almost there to next year, so we can kind of work on the second year. We've just basically been bootstrapping it for about a year. And so, it's working. We've had people ask if they want to invest into our company or if they could. But for me, I want to make it a values-driven company that prioritizes that kind of mission. And so giving up that equity can be scary. I don't need to retain full control. I don't need to control, like, I'm not my business, that's separate. But at the same time, like, the way that people are able to impact the world and change society is going to be through business. And I believe that's the future of influence, right? You can do that through people and the government and other things like that. But really, at the end of the day, people need things, right? And the best way you can do that is through funds and through people and through your initiatives as a company. That's why I don't give up equity.
Shifting gears slightly, you have to acquire customers to get revenue. How did you go about finding your first customers, and has that changed over time as you've become bigger?
I was very fortunate this time around. So I've tried to do other business things before, and some of them have been done really well, and some of them have been more difficult to get customers, right? But I was really fortunate this time around that the customers just came to me. There was just like hundreds of customers a day just messaging me. I would sell something out in sometimes minutes of posting it. Sometimes I would sell things within a couple of days of posting. So we did a lot of social media marketing. Now we have our own platform. We are on other places, like other social media platforms. We're on Google. So now we have a lot of different avenues and channels. But at the beginning, the first customers came through Facebook Marketplace. Go where people are already at. And so don't try and reinvent the wheel. If people are looking and searching for items in a certain particular place, go there. So that's what we did.
Was there a way you figured out Facebook Marketplace in terms of cost, in terms of reach? How did you make that calculus in your head?
Like the pricing or how much we put into it?
No, the cost to acquire a customer.
So it was very, very low to acquire a customer on Facebook because they're already on social media, right? And so we did end up boosting some of our posts, but for the most part, we didn't. We acquired followers. We got recommendations after that, making sure that we had our reviews really good, right? There's going to always be people who are not happy with things or don't understand the market because the market for workout equipment was inflated and you couldn't buy them anywhere. And so sometimes people just didn't understand the market or economics, or just people who are grumpy. But for the most part, we made our customers happy, and we showed that, we demonstrated that, we made things right if there was anything that we made a mistake on. So it didn't really cost us too much on social media. I guess now, because Facebook changed its algorithms with Apple's new privacy, it's made it more difficult. But that's where, as an entrepreneur and innovator, you have to figure out what to do next, right? Like always be on top of that. And so we've moved on to Google and working on other platforms, trying to get onto YouTube and TikTok. It all takes time.
How did you think about pricing your equipment in early stages when it is still a side hustle, and has that approach changed over time?
The approach has changed a little bit. At the beginning, it was trial and error, right? Like how much you want to price it at a price that you can sell the item quickly, so high turnover. But at the same time, you want to get the highest price, right? So it's not going online and like figuring out what is the average or whatever. Like the market is always changing, especially during the pandemic. Things were changing on an hourly basis based on the news, based on supply chain. Like it was changing so rapidly. So you can't have like data and analytics. You have to almost have that intuition of like, what should this price be based on historical data, based on the news coming out, based on the environment that I'm in. And it's not based on even the value of the item. It's based on other factors. And so it was a lot more like emotionally driven. Even consumers are very emotionally driven. So the pricing wasn't based on the price of the item, right? So a lot of times the used equipment was even more expensive than it was new 5 years ago. So I guess having that intuition was really important. And then now it's even like calculating a little bit more of like, okay, so what is the price of the market? But also what is the price, because the market has cooled more now, what is the price of, labor? What's the price of time and gas and overhead? So there's a lot more that goes into it now. And our prices are generally a little bit higher than to write some money on Facebook. But we also have that guarantee and the insurance that it's been checked. We know what we're talking about and we're a business versus somebody who's selling something on Facebook has no clue what it is. And then you end up with a screwed machine.
Which leads us to the next natural question, just financials and modeling. So all of this calculation you talked about implies a certain amount of effort and analysis. How did you approach financial models? Did it change from the early days to now?
So as a business background, having an undergrad in finance and getting my master's in international business, it is very important to have a financial model and to have business plans. However, during this time, I did not do that. So I would not recommend it. Speed and intensity is very important, especially when there's a very volatile market and a very changing and uncertain world, right? So that's what I prioritize over the data and analytics and making sure I have everything perfect. There's certain things that you need to have done, obviously, like your taxes and certain things like that. But for the most part, you don't need to have everything analyzed if you're already doing really well. Figure out what the market needs, how you can do that, and then go for that. And then you can analyze it. If you start going down in your statistics, you get better infrastructure, then you can do all that analytics. But at the beginning, it's more important to keep that stride if you're already there.
You have an Asian heritage, and it's hard enough for a woman or a BIPOC woman entrepreneur to have any kind of business, but particularly in a male-dominated business like fitness equipment. Can you talk about what your experience has been through this process? What have been the challenges?
I guess one advantage of being online is that it's sometimes easier to sell because they don't really see who's selling it. They just say hey, this is equipment, this is what I'm buying. But in person, it's a little bit more difficult. So sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I've had people come up to me and ask me if I know what I'm talking about, right? And this equipment that I'm selling, that I've sold thousands of dollars of equipment, and they're asking me if I know how this works. So it's just something that I have to understand that other people have a different perception, and I can stand out by doing my homework, by knowing what I'm talking about. In terms of working with other manufacturers within the business side of things, it's a lot more difficult because it's a smaller community and people know other people. And so as a female, it is more challenging to get in there. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's important that you have male colleagues or male friends who can help promote you. But it is disappointing to see that it is more difficult. But I guess it's a factor of life that females just have to overcome.
What has helped? What do the male affiliates or associates help accomplish for you? How does that play out in real life?
So in real life, practically it can look like they can advocate for you. So they can make introductions. They can give recommendations, which is huge for females because a lot of times they already have that perception of, do you know what you're talking about? Why are you in this industry? And so that can be a lot more difficult if you don't have someone advocating for you or recommending you, because it's hard to get into those spaces. On a practical note, it's hard to negotiate prices when they won't sit down at a table to talk to you.
And how do you get over that?
Being persistent, not letting yourself get discouraged if one guy says no, or if you have one bad experience, going after what you want and not letting that, affect you too much, because the world is a big place. And I'm sure that you can get another place if you're motivated enough. And the world is changing. So hopefully as women become more in this space, that it will be more open to other women.
It sounds like it was already hard enough just with going to college and all of this stuff. And you had to consistently face a lot of these barriers. Has it ever gotten to a point where it just got to be too much or things seemed just too hard? And how have you gotten through those?
Right, there have been certain times of discrimination, particularly in finding a place. I reached out to someone and it seems like they had a problem either with my age or gender. So I don't know what it was, but I know it was not a great experience. But I ultimately found the place that I needed to be at. And so I was happy with that. I don't think being Asian, again, has affected me, but I also grew up in a very white community. So I was adopted as well. And so I probably haven't had the same kind of discrimination or kind of same upbringing as someone who's completely Asian. So yeah, I've had those stereotypes. I've had people ask if I can speak Chinese or have misconceptions of who I am. But as I get to know them, I can show them more of who I am.
What have been some of your proudest or most cherished moments through this journey? And why have they been special?
There's been a number of them. Obviously, making our customers happy is really rewarding. Being able to have a voice and speak within the community. And I think that's definitely due to having and owning a business. When you own and have a business, you're able to speak and be heard a little bit more because you have that, I guess, audacity to start something different. And people respect that. The other really rewarding thing is to be able to have, employees that we can provide a space for them to work. And so it's something that they can feel ownership and seeing the company grow. It's my business, but at the same time, you can't grow an empire by yourself. It always takes other people. And so it's important to recognize that and to make them, and the people who, help make it what it is, build and create it, important to that calling, that mission, and to what you're building. Particularly, we have one person in the Philippines who is full-time, and she's able to take care of her 5 kids, I think 4 or 5 kids, with our work that we provide.
So what does the future hold? You still have hopefully many, many years and decades ahead of you. So what does the future hold for Juliana? What does it hold for the company?
What COVID has definitely taught me, as well as my experience just throughout life, is that you can't be certain about the future. The only thing you can be certain about is death and taxes. So as far as what I want to do, I want to continue to make the world a better place through entrepreneurship and through education. And how that looks like is maybe a couple businesses, a couple international businesses, just looking at opportunities and stepping through the doors that I feel like are the right decision.
So what advice would you give either your younger self or other women who are maybe not as far along as you are?
Don't be afraid or scared to want to do the right thing and to do something that you're called to do. If you have good friends and family, they'll be able to support you along the way. With my faith, I believe that my needs are going to be taken care of no matter what. And so I feel like I have the confidence to go into that. Along with that, I've put things in place that have been safety nets, like 1, I'm young, so I can take more risk. 2, I have an undergrad, so I can get a job. And 3, I really don't need that much in life. Like, I don't need all the things. So if you understand more of your purpose in life and more of what you need and what drives you, you realize what you're able to give up to have fun and to live out your dreams, right? And relationships, again, are very important because you can't get to where you're at without those. And so mentorships definitely are something that I would highly, highly recommend as a young person, as someone who's starting in something. You don't know everything. And even if you get up there and build a business, you still don't know everything. So it's very important to have advisors and mentors.
This has been an awesome conversation, Juliana. Thank you very much for taking the time. I'm certainly inspired, and I'm pretty sure many other listeners are going to be too. So I wish you all the best, and thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Find show notes and more at achieve.co. That's achiiv.co/podcast. Like what you heard? Hit subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcast and never miss another episode. Want to help others like you? Leave us a review and tell a friend. See you on the next episode. Now, Go achieve.